Welcome back to the Nothing Notable podcast. This is our year in review, best of 2021 series. For this episode here, we're talking about television. The small screen, as some would call it, something that we all know and love. But has the small screen overtaken the big screen in terms of prestige? We'll answer that question and more on today's Nothing Notable podcast.
Oh my God. Okay.
And the short answer, I think, this year is no.
That's a good place to start.
Dude, you guys question my fucking methods to my madness, but I'm a goddamn genius out here.
I was not questioning
You want to know about discourse? I'm your guy.
Oh, okay.
They should have me moderate all presidential debates.
Well, let me directly address what you just said, Tyler. I agree. I think 2020 was a really good year for TV. This year had some like really strong highlights, but honestly, I there's not a ton of shows that left me going like, oh, here it is.
And to kind of sum up the TV in 2021, I think everything was like really close to being super good, and then it just wasn't. And that's like not one show. That's like every single show is like, eh.
I would disagree with that strongly because I saw two things this year that I thought were two of the best things I've ever seen in my life.
That's the same for me also. One of them we definitely, well, I think maybe both of them we share.
Both of them probably.
Yeah. Maybe we'll reveal them.
I think I know which one it is. One of them, at least.
There were real high points for sure, but the majority of the shows, because I mean, we were just talking about this a moment ago, specifically with music. Like I listened to so much music this year, and a lot of it I just did not love. Mm-hmm. A lot of it was not worth talking about, but I listened to so much of it, and I feel similarly about TV. I watched quite a bit of it. Not all of it's going to make it into this conversation because this is the best of 2021. So we're trying to be positive. We're not trying to take down like shows that we really hated. But there were real high highs. Maybe we'll just jump right in. One of the high highs for you and I, Jack, for sure was Midnight Mass.
Absolutely.
All the shows or most of the shows that we are going to talk about, we already have done pods on. So go listen to those if you're interested in hearing more in-depth analysis, if you can call it that. But let me just do one last sales pitch on like why you should watch this particular show. If you're at all interested in Stephen King stories, movies or books, if you're at all interested in the horror genre, just watch it. Go into it completely cold. You will 100% enjoy it. For my money, this is one of the best single seasons of television that I've ever seen. I put it up there with season 1 of True Detective and other shows that I can't think of off the top of my head. But Midnight Mass is one of my favorite things that I've ever watched.
Would you say that it's a Pantheon show? Pantheon season?
I mean, for me, yeah, it definitely is. I can't say that it would be for everyone because it's so of its own ilk. It's very Flanagan. And if you've seen anything else that is Flanagan, it's Flanagan. And what Flanagan does best above anyone else that's working in the industry is he does very thoughtful, deep character studies within the genre of horror. A lot of trauma is not just boiling up, it's on the surface, and like it's ever present, it's constant. So like if you're not into essentially long therapy moments where characters sort of monologue at each other about various traumas that they've experienced while spooky stuff is going on in the background, you know, in a secondary fashion until the end, then maybe it's not for you. But for me, that's why I love Night of the Living Dead. That's why I love Get Out. That's why I love movies that are, you know, they use horror as an avenue to explore social themes. So yeah, is Midnight Mass a Pantheon show? For me, it absolutely is.
Every episode of this season leaves you wanting to watch the next episode. Great escalation. I thought all the characters in the show were fantastic. Excellent performances from the whole entire cast. Absolutely check it out if you haven't yet because it's top-notch stuff.
Last thought on Midnight Mass. When we did the pod about it, we said that Hamish Linklater gave the best performance of the year in television. Do you still feel that way after watching other stuff?
This season of Succession was real damn good.
Yeah. I stand by the fact that I think Hamish Linklater gave the best performance. It's hard to argue with Jeremy Strong as Kendall. It's hard to argue with Brian Cox as Logan in Succession season 3 because we've already got 2 seasons before this season of ramping up and building up, and so there's a lot of character stuff that like goes into that as well. But Hamish Linklater for me still just gave one of the best performances. But before we talk about Succession season 3, since Tyler, you haven't watched that one yet, I want to hear one or two of your shows from this year.
Sweet. Okay, I'll start with I got 2 that I really like this year. First one is a big one.
Okay.
I really did like Loki. Loki was a Disney Plus series. Tom Hiddleston is a lot of fun in it. It is thankfully 6 episodes. They don't like overstay their welcome. Richard E. Grant is in it, and he plays like classic Loki from the comic books.
Hell yeah.
And that's hella cool. And then at the end, not that anyone cares, it's a spoiler.
Sure. Why not?
Jonathan Majors makes his MCU debut, and like Jonathan Majors is one of my favorite actors, and he's really great in it. But yeah, Loki is just like a weird MCU thing. And then I think it's honestly the best MCU. I haven't seen Spider-Man yet. None of us have. I'm seeing it in a week, but by the time this podcast comes on, I would have seen it. But Loki is probably the best thing they've done this year. And, you know, Hawkeye and all the other ones, like I just want to talk about because it's not like this is the best of. But Loki was a lot of fun. And then this is like a fun, like little documentary series that I watched at the beginning of the year. It's called Can't Get You Out of My Head. It's a 2021 documentary, 6-episode miniseries. And basically it's basically just like a history lesson, but it's like history of the 1900s, like just through like it feels like off the cuff. Like it just starts talking about something and then it directly ties into something happening like thousands of miles across the earth. And it's just super interesting and talks about like a lot about power and like civil rights era and stuff. And it's just super interesting. And I would highly recommend that one. But no one really knows about that. All of it was on YouTube when I watched it. I'm not sure if it's still there, but really solid stuff. I'd highly recommend that.
I have 2 follow-up questions. One's about Loki and one's about Can't Get You Out of My Head. First, I'll start with Loki. With the MCU shows, because I canceled my Disney Plus. I'm well documented. I'm not a Marvel guy. No disrespect to anyone that works on those movies.
What about The Mandalorian?
I'm not a Mandalorian guy either.
But Luke Skywalker's
Luke Skywalker. Let me ask you this, though. With the MCU shows, do you want them to be cleaning up loose ends, or do you want them to be like their own small little worlds?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say when I first started watching WandaVision, I think I always wanted it to be like tied into the greater MCU and stuff. And then at the end, it isn't really, and that was kind of disappointing. But the thing is, like, Evan Peters comes in like the 3rd episode or something, and Evan Peters plays Quicksilver in the X-Men universe, and then like he's Quicksilver in this universe, and you're like, whoa, what's happening? And then the joke was that it was just like a guy. It was just an actor, and his name was literally Ralph Boner.
Right.
It was like a boner joke, which is actually like kind of cool for the MCU, and I like kind of like that part. But what I didn't like was just like the big CGI action scene at the end. But what I really liked about Loki was that it kind of was a mix, you know. It introduced like a big villain that's going to be in Ant-Man 3 with a huge actor, but it was also just self-contained. Like Jonathan Majors, like again spoilers, dies at the end of his appearance, and then Loki goes back, and then he's in a different dimension or different universe, and Kang is like the ruler of that universe. But yeah, it's something like I think I just want it to tie into itself. The more I think about it, like again in Hawkeye, like a big character from a different MCU thing that you didn't think was tied into this came in just in this last episode, and I just kind of like that. Like I like when it's just self-contained, I think, honestly, because then it's just too much homework.
Yeah.
And the thing I liked about Loki the most was it was about Loki, but it wasn't like Thor was really in it or anything. It wasn't like Asgard was in it. It was basically like a buddy cop movie with like Owen Wilson and Loki. And Owen Wilson is like the best part of the movie or the TV show. And like, I will say, like, it's weird that Owen Wilson is in the MCU, and it's weird that like I know his name, but it's way easier to just say Owen Wilson. And his like character like loves jet skis and stuff, and I think that was the best part of the series. So to answer your question, I think I want it to tie in a little bit, but like mainly focus on your own character arcs, and I think Loki does that well because Loki's never going to come back to the normal MCU because he's just he's a variant of Loki. He's not like the original Loki. The original Loki like died like in 2018. So, you know, I think it's fun, and I think it's cool that there's going to be a season 2 of Loki. And there's not going to be no other season 2s of any other Marvel movie or TV show. Sorry.
For sure. Then with Can't Get You Out of My Head, I kind of want to just check the temperature of like documentary series as opposed to movies. Jack, are you able to stay engaged over that long a period of time with documentary series, or is it something you prefer to see in movies?
Are we talking about like we throw like The Last Dance from last year in this category?
For sure, yeah, that's a documentary series.
I can absolutely get groovy with a documentary series. What I think is nice about like a documentary series or a mini series is you can like get more information into it without it feeling like it's being dragged out too long. So in that sense, like, yeah, I can absolutely get down with a documentary series.
And then same thing for you, Tyler. I mean, this show really worked for you. So you don't have an issue with stretching it out over a period of time.
I honestly think I prefer, it's like the difference between like, this is a bad comparison, but I'll just say it. It's the difference between like a history, like pamphlet and like a history book. Like,
no, that's a good, that's actually that's a good example.
Well, what I was originally thinking about was a history test, and I was like, why is it a test? And then I said pamphlet at the last minute. I'm like, this makes way more sense.
Those first two don't go together.
Those first two don't go together.
It's not related. It's like the difference between an apple and a history book.
Exactly. But like I was saying, it's a history pamphlet and a history textbook. I think history, I mean, I was talking to my coworker today, and I was like, I just love history so much. He's like, oh, I don't. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, that, because you don't have an intuitive mind. But
put his full name, number, and address into this podcast.
But like I was saying, I think history is better stretched out over a 10-part series than it would be over, an hour and a half. And I think definitely I won't say what documentary series I watched, but it was very interesting, and it was a 6-part, maybe 8. I don't know. I don't remember. I'm not talking about it. But what I'm saying is that documentary series are, I think, better. Like even Tiger King from last year, documentary series.
That was a fiction series.
Yeah, it was more of like a reality TV show documentary series.
That was just a mini series. They fucking wrote that shit.
Yeah. But anyways, like series like that, I think work far better than a movie. Because I was thinking about Free Solo, and I liked that movie. But it's just, or like Three Identical Strangers. I saw that movie too last year, but it came out 3 years ago or whatever. But again, I think it's way more interesting to just stretch it out, because I think you can look into things more in history than you can, if it's just a pamphlet.
I think you really tapped into something that I want to spend a whole podcast talking about, but I'll skip over it for the most part.
That people who don't like history don't have an intuitive mind.
That's exactly
and you want to beat them up.
That's the oil reserve.
Tyler wants to get into a big old fight at work. That's what I'm reading on my notes right now.
Yeah. All I'm saying is I know all the presidents, and I know what happened then.
All of them? What happened to them?
Yes. Most of them are dead. There's only 5 alive right now, I think.
Mm.
Well,
breaking news.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter died.
No, but I think you tapped into something really interesting, which is like the subject of the documentary really, again, this sounds so obvious, but it's not always adhered to. Like the subject of the documentary really does dictate whether it works as a series or not. And like, to be more specific, I think history absolutely should be series based. For movies, if it's just about like this guy trying to find this musical artist that was a great inspiration to him, like that's a movie, that doesn't have to necessarily be a series. So I think that's really interesting. I want to talk about that more in the future.
I mean, and that's what worked about Can't Get You Out of My Head so much, because I think it was a 6-parter. I think it was 6 hours. But it was so like kind of stream of consciousness with how it was set up. And it's like, yes, like this one, demographics going here, but then at the same exact time, like this is happening here, and this is why it all connects. And it's like, that is like the human condition. And that's like, because life is not as clean as like act 1, 2, and 3. So it's like it was just super interesting. I'd never seen a form of media like that. And it was like a bunch of archival footage mixed with like a narration from like a very British man. So it was really good. And I'd recommend checking it out.
that's a very good rec that I think I will definitely check out soon.
Movie night.
I'd rewatch it.
Let's talk about a show that all three of us have watched. We've talked about it on podcasts. A lot of that conversation has been cut out. But let's talk about I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson. Really?
Yeah.
What Jack and I have been like rewatching bits and sketches and just lines from not just this show, but from Tim Robinson's entire catalog over the last few weeks. And I've been trying to think about like what it is that makes it so funny. And instead of just recommending the show, I kind of want to very quickly try to tap into what it is that is magic. And we won't be able to fully understand it, because if we would fully understand it, it wouldn't be funny. But one of the things that for me works so well about the show is Tim is trying so hard. And that's just funny to me.
That's, that's exactly what I was going to say when you posed this question, is it's 100% commitment to the bit, no matter what. And these characters that he's playing just 100% believe what they're saying.
And one thing that I think is so interesting is like, I'll watch a sketch, I will laugh, but I won't laugh super hard because it is so like abrasive and aggressive and insane. But it lives with me. It lives rent-free in my head forever after that. And I get harder laughs on memory than I do on the initial watch, which is just such a credit to the lasting power of that sort of style of comedy.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, both of you. But I think on the rewatch, it is one of the most rewatchable sketch comedy shows ever, because like it just gets funnier. Like you just understand things more. It's kind of like, I feel like I've made this. It's
kind of like not a history book, but like a history test.
It's like a test. No, it's oh my God, where was I going with this? I know it. It's like A Clockwork Orange. Like if you guys have ever read A Clockwork Orange, it doesn't make any sense. Like the first like 2 pages are like, what is happening? Because they're speaking a different language. But the more you read it and the more you watch, I Think You Should Leave, the more you're like, I'm like speaking this weird new language. And yeah, like the Shark Tank sketch, like I did not get it the first time, but I rewatched it and I'm like, this is like so ridiculously funny. And it's just so fast. And I feel like that with every sketch. And I remember I got Korean barbecue the other night with a couple of friends.
So did I. Where'd you go?
We went to this place in Koreatown.
Okay, I don't think I went there, but there's more than one Korean barbecue place in Los Angeles.
There is a lot of them. Anyways, good rice. We were walking home from there, and then my friend and I were talking about I Think You Should Leave, and like we were just like riffing, and then my roommate was like, "Oh yeah, I don't really get it. Like I honestly don't like that show." And we're just like, you just haven't watched enough of it. You just like need to rewatch it, because it is so funny, and it has such great guest stars. Like Paul Walter Hauser is great in his sketch, and and Patty Harrison. Like shout out to Patty Harrison so hard, because she's so good in that show.
I think you hit it perfectly, which is that it's speaking its own language, and you can't be mad at someone for not understanding that language, but all we can ask is that you give it you give it another try if you watched it and you didn't fully enjoy it. Yeah, it's just one of the funniest shows. We've talked about it quite a bit, so we can end it there.
We can move on. Yeah.
Real quick, I just want to talk about a show, a revival that I've really been enjoying. I'm not caught up on it, so maybe it totally blows it at the end, and it will not be on this podcast by the time maybe I'll edit myself out. But the show is Dexter New Blood.
Oh, yeah.
I was a big fan of the original series Dexter, and the first 4 seasons were so special. And after that, it trailed off a little bit. It got a little bit worse each year. Michael C. Hall, it's just an amazing performance back then and now. And so to have him back and to be able to sort of right the ship after what was a disappointing finale and final season is awesome. I commend Showtime and I commend the creators of Dexter for wanting to come back and do another version of this ending for the fans. And it works very well. Narratively, it feels cohesive. It feels of a piece with its previous seasons, but it feels very fresh. One of the only complaints I have about the original series is it does look mid 2000s. Like it has that look. This show is gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's set in a different type of location. It's set in Alaska. And so it's very snowy and white. And that's very contrasted to the setting of Miami in the original series. Really wonderfully edited show. It's really good. I really like it. It's a wonderful performance. It's Michael C. Hall's best performance. And I missed Dexter. You know, it was one of those foundational shows for me that was one of the reasons I fell in love with television and media. And it was so transgressive and out there and completely original, and ushered in sort of that, with The Sopranos, that era of like the anti-hero at the center of the frame. And so to have him back is really fun. And I've really been enjoying it. Again, I have not caught up. I have not finished it yet. But it's very nice. It's nice when the band gets back together and they make a good album. They don't just make an album, but they make a good album.
Can I actually, jumping off that, I have another one, sorry.
Yes.
And it's currently airing, so that's why it's similar to Dexter. And it is an old show. But I think this season's just so much fun because every season is just so good. But It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh, good.
The new series is airing right now. And I've been watching it. I've been keeping up, and it is just great. Also, Dan, this was, I'm not sure if you watched this channel growing up, but I think you did. But I saw an actor in the newest It's Always Sunny episode, the gang replaces D with a monkey, which, if you need to watch the season 15 of It's Always Sunny, there you go. And I was like, oh my God, that guy looks so familiar. And he was like a Key of Awesome cast member.
No way.
Yeah, he doesn't have I'm not sure if he has like a huge part or not in it, but he was just like a one-off guy in an episode. And I was like, oh my God, why does that guy look so familiar? And I immediately looked up like the One Direction parodies Key of Awesome used to do. And he was the Zane in it, which is funny. And I think he played Harry Potter when they did Harry Potter. But
Yeah.
I think his name is like, he has a crazy ass name, but it's something. It was just funny. I was like, it like ignited something I hadn't thought of in like 10 years.
I am a huge Key of Awesome fan.
Yeah.
That's a foundational thing for me.
Same.
That's every now and then
Don't rewatch them.
I rewatch them pretty often.
Okay,
and they are what they are. But I'm not going to talk about Key of Awesome.
I've but
threatened.
we can talk about this after, but It's Always Sunny, we'll get back to that, is really good. It's funny because it was one of the first like naughty shows that I watched.
Yeah.
But it's like not naughty at all. And like, it's really funny because the second episode of the season is called The Gang Makes Lethal Weapon, or it's just called Lethal Weapon 7. And it's just crazy that they go back to that because after all the controversy of 2020 and all that stuff, it is refreshing to see like a comedy thing that's like, I'm not saying cancel culture is like horrible and blah, blah, blah.
Yes,
blah,
let's
blah,
turn
blah.
this into a cancel culture pod.
But all I'm saying is that it is refreshing to see a comedy group. I will say, like, all of those people are a comedy group, just like making something for themselves still, and like making something like I would never, after like having to like pull our Lethal Weapon episodes, if we made that, like I couldn't make another one, like, but it was like they charge head on into it, and it's really great. And I think It's Always Sunny can never, like, I want to see it forever. I want to see them super old. Like, they're already super old. It's 15 seasons in. And it's just really impressive that, like, they can still find stuff to do and make it unique and fun. And it is still unique, fun, and just really fucking funny. And,
It's that irreverent quality that allows for the show to still be so fresh 15 seasons in. Because, like you said, they're just doing their thing and they don't care. They're making it for themselves. They have the fans in mind, obviously. But, like, they would never compromise their quote unquote vision of what the show is and who these characters are in order to appease anybody. And that's, you just gotta love that. You just gotta love that.
And there's such a good bit in episode 2 with Dennis and like him going on dates. And it's like everything with Dennis always is just so messed up, but it's also so funny, you know, cause it's,
because of the implication.
It's the implication. Yeah. It's good. And yeah, they just bring me a lot of joy, that whole crew. And they're just, again, they're killing it. And I'm just happy they can still make the show. There was a while, like, I think I want to say season 13 or 12 or 13 when Glenn Howerton was like in Fargo and he was doing like AP Bio and stuff. And it was like, oh my God, it's like this the first domino. And they're all going to just do different things. Like Charlie Day's like the main villain of Pacific Rim 2.
Right.
And that's not a joke. He is, which is insane that I forgot about that. But like it is. And like Dee got her own show. And like it's just crazy that like they're all big stars, but they still come back to do It's Always Sunny and like write it and just do it together. And it's great.
It's a wonderful show. That's a high rec for me. Also, I'm a few seasons behind, but I'm going to get catching up pretty soon. Jack, give me another show.
Okay. This one, just real quick. I really enjoyed this season 41 of the hit CBS show Survivor.
This is awesome. Good job,
Survivor.
Jack.
So I used to watch Survivor all the time when I was a young boy with my family, like all the time. And then I stopped watching it for a few years. And then last season 40 was a season where they had like all winners come back. So I'm like, okay, I'll check that out. And it was really cool. And it got me like back into it. And I was watching it this year. And when you're older now and can like think about it in a more intelligent way and think about all the different aspects of gameplay that go into it, I think it's super interesting. The finale of it is actually airing right now as we speak, so I'm gonna have to watch it tomorrow.
Did you watch Survivor growing up, Dan?
Only a little bit.
Okay.
My family was more into like the cooking shows, Hell's Kitchen and Master Chef and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So yeah.
because it's funny because real fast on my Survivor background. So my parents got divorced when I was little. and my dad got me Thursday nights and every other weekend. But every Thursday night I'd be at my dad's house. And Survivor aired on Thursday nights. So it'd be like our thing. We'd like, me, my sister, and my dad would watch Survivor. And I used to be a huge Survivor head. So like, again, I think I watched like I must have watched like at least like 10, 15 seasons because I think they make 2 seasons a year.
Right, yeah.
At least
that's why they're on season 41 of right now.
Yeah, or it's like it's 2021.
Yeah.
And it started in 2000. Like it doesn't make
it's
any
insane.
sense.
And Jeff Probst is still the host of it.
Yeah, like there has not been a lot of consistency in like any show for 20 years. Maybe The Simpsons, but not even that. Like the animation has changed, but Survivor has been probably the most consistent show.
Right. I was watching this season and I'm like, I might try to get on this show. I think I'm going to go do it because I think I could win.
Would you play a character? Or like
no, I would just be me.
Okay,
but
cool.
I think I would win.
Okay, cool.
I think maybe I wouldn't win. I think I could get pretty far.
Yeah. Would you be like a Russell type or would you be like
No,
Rupert?
because that dude's horrible. He's actually great for television, but he's like an awful person.
It's one of those shows, and we will briefly talk about Squid Game momentarily, but it's the same sort of thing as Squid Game where like you can project yourself onto it, even if you, for example, Jack, even if you never go on it,
right? You
put yourself in the shoes and you're like, here's what I would do in that situation. That's why it's so endlessly fun, and that's why it's able to be in season 41 is because you can. It is basically like another major American sport. Very much a show that I have not watched recently, but again, I would even recommend it just because it's so fun. Yeah.
So Jack, what's the bet this season? Like what's the idea like behind the season? So season 40 was like winners.
Season 40 was called Winners at War.
It would be fun if they just brought all the people who got eliminated first back.
That would be actually kind of fun. That'd be pretty funny.
I love that.
These people like don't have like, because really like the people on the show are essentially characters because the show, like they filmed the whole show and then they air it after. So like the way the show is presented to us, the audience, is like a story. It's the story of how like the winner won that season pretty much, or in someone like Russell's case, it's the story of how he lost the season because this dude Russell, for those of you who don't know, absolute asshole, horrible guy, was like burning people's shoes and like just trying to manipulate everyone and got to the end like both times that he played and didn't win.
Because if you don't know Survivor, the whole point of the ending is like there's 3 people left and then the jury votes for you. So everyone who got voted out votes for you.
So you have to vote out people who will then decide if you get $1 million or not. So there's so many different levels that go into it, which is what I find fascinating. I forget what the original point I was saying was.
Oh, you're talking about Russell, yeah.
you were saying, what's the bit?
Oh, what's the bit of this season? Yeah.
This season, it's just like a regular season. There's no like gimmick that's going on. The one thing that is different is normally they go for 40 days. This time it's just 26 days. And they spun that as like it's a more fast-paced thing, but like when you think about it, like what it really is that they have to quarantine for 14 days.
Yeah.
So like all their crew and stuff too, and they probably only get paid for the 40 days to begin with. So like that's why. But it's been like a really interesting season. I will say it's not the quote unquote bit that they're doing, but they have a lot more people of color on this year. But it's just been interesting because like there was like 4 black people on the show, and they all like wanted to work together and get to the end. But like this one dude was like, I know that if I go to the end with this person, like I won't win. And he was like very conflicted because like he wants to win the game, obviously. But he also like wants to like lift up like his people. So he was just very conflicted with that. So it's not, the bit is the wrong word to use. But they've been highlighting this year a lot more of like the diversity in the cast.
I want to jump on that real quick because I've noticed that in most recent seasons of Top Chef also. The
Top Chef is another great show.
Another Pantheon show. But the shows are becoming more inclusive. They're adding more people of color, like you said, and that is dramatically changing how the show actually works. With Top Chef, it was, back in the day, it would be a bunch of white people, and it would be like, hey, this week I present you with a traditional Japanese dish, but with my spin on it.
Yeah.
Now it's like an actual Japanese American person, and they are presenting not only a wonderful meal, but also a representation of their culture. And so the kind of show that it is really changes because of that. And in the case of Survivor, that dynamic is really interesting.
Right, because so there's like a bunch of people on the internet who are like, why do they have to always talk about race on the show now? But like, it's one of those things that us white folk don't realize, that people of color are always going to be people of color. Like they're always going to have to deal with that in every setting that they're in. So that's why it's being talked about on the show, because it's something that does affect their gameplay.
I think it couldn't be a better transition from Survivor into a show that Tyler, you and I talked about already, so we'll just briefly talk about now, but Squid Game.
Yeah.
I guess, we had a very wonderful conversation about it already. Since then, have your thoughts changed at all? Where does this show kind of rank? We're not doing like a top 10 list, but like how is this faring in your sort of made up rankings?
I mean, my made up rankings, it like ranks near the top. I mean, I do really enjoy this show. I mean, it was in a year that was like a lot of waiting. Like, I feel like this was just something that was so like event television, and something like you could scream at the TV and being like, yeah, like again with that tug of war thing, and they cut to black. You're like, I was like screaming and shouting, and it's just like, again, it's like I have the only time I felt like that was like during like when I saw the Dodgers Giants play in the NLDS this year. It was like insane. It was like, and you're real fast on sports. But like
save that for the next section.
Yeah, well, we'll save it. Anyways, just there wasn't any TV show this year where I was like jumping out of my seat, but Squid Game, I did jump out of my seat, and it sucks that like it didn't end that well, because like that's my big thing. I'll talk about Nightmare Alley soon, but like that ending's so good, and Squid Game's ending so bad that I just like it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And but it doesn't mean the first 3/4 wasn't good. It's just like that last fourth is just like but like the first 3/4 were incredible, and it's very great television. And it was just something like, again, it brought everything in Survivor and then mixed it with like some sort of like, it mixed it with like Parasite, like something that like I really love about like classism and stuff like that. And it was just great, honestly. And I don't know. I don't have more to say about it. We had a great conversation about it, and I am really happy I watched it. Even though the ending is like weird, and it's like he has red hair, and it's like he's going back to Squid Game. It's like, okay, cool. Well, see your fucking kid, dude.
My only last thought on Squid Game is something that you were kind of just hitting at right there, is in a year of waiting, this was a show that just dropped on my head. And there's something really special about that, because so many of my, this is particularly the case with movies, but sometimes it's the case with TV also. Like we really follow this stuff in the news. We know when like Colin Farrell is going to star in this boating show that's going to be premiering on AMC Plus, because like that's stuff that we're interested in, you know, like we're not necessarily interested in celebrity, but like celebrities
I love boating shows personally.
you know, so we like keep up with this stuff, and we know that like the next season of Ozark is going to drop on this date, you know, so we have stuff that we're able to keep tabs on. But Squid Game, because it's a foreign show that was from a creator that a lot of people didn't know and had a lot of actors that a lot of Americans didn't know, it just came out of nowhere. And there's something, it was the same thing with Tiger King. There's something about like just being swept off your feet, completely surprised, not just by the quality of the show, but by the show's existence itself, that is really fun. So I think that's my only last thought on Squid Game. Like you said, we talked about it, so please do go listen to that, because I thought it was a really good conversation. We have just a few more shows left. A lot of great shows this year that are going to be left off the list, but you know, boo-hoo. One more show that we've also talked about, but we'll mention because we have to be holistic in this best of 2021 pod, What We Do in the Shadows. There's a lot more comedy on our list than I was expecting. Last year was a lot more drama. This year was a lot more comedy, which is funny because last year I would have thought, you know, we needed more of a pick-me-up, and then 2021 would be more of like the okay, let's get back to business here.
Let's get back to grit.
But I think part of the real tragedy of 2021 was that it was a lot more of the same of 2020. You know, COVID didn't go away overnight. A lot of stuff changed, but in many ways,
it's back.
It also didn't. Yeah, it's back. We got the Megatron variant now.
Megatron.
But What We Do in the Shadows is a show that is constantly, it's a joyous show, and it's uplifting, and it's so silly. I think one thing that we didn't totally hit on that I would like to add to the conversation about the show is it has that element of like high school theater, like playing dress up. Like it's so silly because it's these actors in fangs and like pale makeup and capes and stuff. And like, there's that Halloween party, high school theater sort of vibe to it, where it's just like so fun and silly and playful that you can't help but be totally in love with it. You know?
Totally. Yeah. I feel the same way. I mean, we did 4 videos on What We Do in the Shadows, and it was just a joy. Because similar to high school theater, like I think everyone in the show feels like someone we went to school with, or like someone like who was in just high school theater, like an over the top person. And then, you know, Nadja, they're all vampires. No, but you know,
I went to Vampire Academy.
But yeah, What We Do in the Shadows is just one of the best series on television, and it's just great. I don't have too much more to say about it, but I just think if you haven't checked it out yet, like definitely check it out. Fucking Nandor is great in that season.
Oh yeah.
Listen to Bare Naked Ladies again, unfortunately, because of it. But it's just I think this is the best season too. It's like weird because like there's a lot of weird COVID stuff in it. Like just some actors just hang out with each other too much in the first few episodes. But then I hear that's kind of like Succession season 3 too. And we'll go in that pretty soon. But then the ending I hear like is just like, wait, how'd they do this? So yeah, 2021 is interesting because there's a lot of shows that were just like being held up, and then there were a lot of shows that actually filmed during the pandemic and then like have now come out like in a better stage of the pandemic. Maybe we'll see. I don't know. Anyways, anything else about What We Do in the Shadows? Because I remembered my show now.
Oh, good. Yeah, yes. I again, just a hard recommend. Just a lovely show. Really, really funny. Jack, watch it.
I've been told that many times.
Yeah.
Dan, we live in the same house. If you just put it on that TV out there, I will watch it. I will sit down and watch it.
Just like before you go to work, just put it on. Jack will like wander out.
Yeah, I'll be like, hey, I'm going to work. What's this? What's this?
Ooh. If you did that, I would 100% watch it.
Okay, Tyler, what's your last show?
Yeah. Could you give that answer in the form of a question? Talking about Jeopardy. I love Jeopardy so much. And this is a sad year for Jeopardy, I want to say. Because there's a lot of stuff happening with obviously Alex Trebek died last year, unfortunately, and they aired out his it was crazy. He filmed enough episodes that at the beginning of 2021 they could just like essentially like air his episodes and then like move on from there. But yeah, there's a beautiful. I didn't get a chance to talk about this last year because I think it like I hadn't seen this part of Jeopardy yet, but he had like it was either Christmas or Thanksgiving episode of Jeopardy, and he like said this really kind thing, and it was after he died, and it was just like him just being like, we need more like.
I remember seeing that on the internet.
Yeah, he just needs more like love and care in the world and thoughtfulness, and yeah, I think Jeopardy did have a rough year because, again, like everyone they found was a bad person somehow. We won't get into this, but like everyone was like, oh, actually they did this thing. And it just makes you think like Alex Trebek was just such like a good force. But from what I watched at the beginning of the year, I used to watch Jeopardy like every day at the beginning of this year. And I love Jeopardy. Jeopardy's like one of my favorite all-time shows. It's just so, and again, it's because I like history so much. And like, it's all just like history
You have an
questions.
intuitive mind.
An intuitive mind.
Unlike Billy DeMucchio,
who lives at
444 Apple Lane.
But I just want to give a shout out to Ken Jennings. I think Ken Jennings did a really good job stepping into his Alex Trebek's shoes. He was the first host of this year. LeVar Burton also did a really great job. And yeah, just Jeopardy is just, again, we talk about a show that has been so consistent. Survivor is that. But also, like, Jeopardy was that. And this is the first year that it has been inconsistent simply because they've had different hosts. Like, they've had like 5 hosts this year. And it's kind of a curse because, like, Aaron Rodgers also did. People forget about this. He was a host at one point. So, I think pretty much everyone who has been a host of Jeopardy has fallen into some controversy this year. But it's still a really solid show. And I think the hosts that have stepped in, Ken Jennings and LeVar Burton especially, were really good this season. Or this year, I should say. Jeopardy, I don't know what season they're on. They just make an episode every day, and it's great, and I love it.
Jeopardy is a show that I really never did watch, and I don't watch much now, but it's a show that I really respect because it encourages like an intelligent TV audience. It encourages education, for lack of a better way of saying it.
It's great to watch with family too, because my mom just like yells stuff sometimes, and it's like, there's no way that's right.
You know who's really good at Jeopardy is my brother.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I can see that,
Because he's a nerd.
Shout out another great TV show this year is your brother's TV show.
My brother's TV show.
Well, speaking of family.
Speaking of family.
Family Guy.
No.
Season 72.
No.
Seth MacFarlane's actually not... You know, he's like not like an executive producer anymore.
He's not running the show anymore. He just does the voices.
Crazy. Sorry.
Succession, our last show that we're going to talk about. We just did a big pod on the season 3 finale. Again, it just gets better and better. The reason it gets better, though, is because it's such a character study. As funny as it is, like, the characters are king. And again, that should be the case for everything, but it's not always in practice done that way. The characters are so king on this show. And the more time you spend with them, the more depth is revealed. Each character is like a mine that it never goes barren. You know, there's always something more. Or
like a history test.
Or like a history test. There's always more beneath whatever oil reserve they tap into. And so it remains exciting. It's exciting, to quote a character this season.
Was that Tom? Did Tom say that?
that was Carl.
Carl? Fuck.
A wonderful season of television. I don't know if it is my favorite or if season 2 is still my favorite. Time will only tell, but it was a big season for Tom, and Tom's always been my favorite character. So that's one of the reasons why this season worked so well for me. Do you have any loose thoughts on Succession beyond what we talked about?
It's an incredible show. For like the last 4 episodes of the season, like after each one, I'm like, this is the best episode of TV I've ever seen. And then the next week, I'm like, no, this is the best episode of TV I've ever seen. And so on and so forth until the finale. It's the fine line between comedy and drama that they, I would say walk, but really they just fucking push the lines together, and it's the same thing, is extraordinary, and it's made possible by the absolutely brilliant cast they have on the show. I think Kieran Culkin said that he has always thought that the show was a comedy and plays it that way, whereas Jeremy Strong says he thinks it's Hamlet,
right,
and plays it like that. We talked about this in our podcast we did, but literally every actor on that show should win an Emmy.
It's a Pantheon show. It's one of the great shows of this century, of this
year.
I'm
excited to catch up on it. Next year, around this time, I hope we're talking about,
Season 4 won't be out.
4. Oh,
yeah.
Really?
They're not going to start filming until next year, like
July, I think is when they said.
Bummer.
They're not even meaning to start writing the show until January.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a while.
Well, that's fine.
Do we have any loose threads to pull on here before we finish? Just about the year overall in TV. Maybe any thoughts going forward? Any last thing that you want to say that you want the people to know about?
Daniel and I will catch up on Walking Dead.
Yeah, and we will. That'll be. We should do something special.
Yeah. Wow, the series finale is coming up, huh?
Yeah.
Shit, I gotta catch
Oh,
up.
they're finally ending it?
Oh, yes. Next season, next year, like 2022. Yeah. Season 11 is the last season.
This is where we'll end it, is going off of that. Walking Dead was a foundational text for us. And television has always been at the heart of our conversations.
Totally.
Whenever you would drive us around in Marin, or we would go hang out at some of our friends' houses, we would always just be talking about what TV we were watching. And this year, I think the shows that we just talked about sort of kept us in that event television area. And you're raising your hand. Go ahead.
I realized I forgot our show.
Oh my
God damn it. It must not have been that good.
Invincible is great.
Okay.
Invincible is great. I would recommend checking out Invincible. I wanted to talk about it, and then I'm like, no, it was Jeopardy I wanted to talk about, but it was both I wanted to talk about. Anyways, Invincible is great. Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman, Steven Yeun.
And I think that's a perfect place to end it. Thank you so much for listening. This has been...
Hey, wait a second. This was my episode.
God. Please.
Thank you guys so much for listening. We had a wonderful time talking about TV today. Tune into the other parts of this series, which you can find here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's great.
Fuck yeah.